In the previous episode, we traced the system, the Freemasons, the media, the money, the philosophy behind it all. A system built over centuries by men with a specific vision of how the world should be ordered, without Allah, without divine guidance, under human control. Now, here is the question that changes everything. What if someone described all of this before any of it existed? What if, 1400 years ago, in 7th century Arabia, a man stood up and described with precise and specific detail the exact world we are living in today? The signs, the conditions, the characteristics of the era we call modern life. What would that mean? It would mean one of two things. Either that man was the most extraordinarily accurate predictor of human civilization in history, or he was exactly who he said he was, a prophet, receiving revelation from the one who created time itself, and therefore sees all of it simultaneously. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was born in 570 CE in the city of Mecca. He grew up as an orphan. He worked as a merchant. He was known by everyone who knew him by two descriptions, as Sadiq, the truthful, and Al-Amin, the trustworthy. At the age of 40, he received the first revelation of the Quran, and for 23 years he delivered a message that transformed the world. Part of that message, recorded in the collections of Hadith, the authenticated sayings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, were descriptions of the future. Not vague predictions, not general statements about human nature, specific, verifiable, falsifiable descriptions of what the world would look like in the time approaching the Day of Judgment. Let us go through them, one by one, and let us be honest about what we see. He said, recorded in Sahih Bukhari, the most rigorously verified collection of hadith, "The hour will not come until knowledge is removed and ignorance spreads." Now, understand what this means. He was not talking about information. We live in the age of more information than any civilization in history. More data, more content, more access to facts than ever before. What he was talking about was knowledge in the Islamic sense, ilm. The knowledge of Allah, of His deen, of the Quran and Sunnah, carried by qualified scholars through an unbroken chain of transmission stretching back to the Prophet, peace be upon him, himself. He said elsewhere, Allah does not remove knowledge by pulling it out of the hearts of people. He removes it by taking away the scholars. Until when no scholar remains, the people will take the ignorant as their leaders. Those leaders will be asked questions and will give rulings without knowledge. They will go astray and lead others astray. Think about the Islamic world today. The great scholars of the previous generation, men who dedicated their entire lives to the Quran and Sunnah, are passing away. The institutions that produced them are weakened. The chain of transmission is under the most severe stress it has ever faced, and in the space left by real scholars, who has filled it? The Ruwaybida, the unqualified, the person with the biggest social media following, speaking about the affairs of 1 billion Muslims with no chain, no qualification, no accountability. He said, "The hour will not come until a man passes by another man's grave and says, 'I wish I were in his place.'" Pause on this. A time when the living envy the dead, when death looks more peaceful than continued life in this world. He said this to people who lived in the desert, who faced real physical hardship every day, who had none of the comforts of modern life. And yet he described a future era, not of physical suffering, but of spiritual and psychological suffering so deep that people would prefer death to continuing. The World Health Organization currently identifies depression as the leading cause of disability worldwide. In the wealthiest countries on Earth, the United States, the United Kingdom, Scandinavia, Australia, suicide rates among young people are at historic highs. Young people who have every material advantage their parents dreamed of, food, shelter, technology, social connection, entertainment, describe their inner lives as empty, meaningless, unbearable. The Prophet, peace be upon him, described this, not as a mystery without explanation, but as the inevitable consequence of a civilization built entirely on the dunya, on material satisfaction as the only goal with nothing beyond it. When the only purpose you have is pleasure, and pleasure always runs out, there is nothing left, no meaning, no anchor, no reason, and a person with no meaning envies the silence of those who have already stopped. He said, "The hour will not come until buildings compete in height." He said this in 7th century Arabia, in a world of mud brick homes and simple stone structures. And yet he described, specifically, a time when buildings would not just be built, but compete, race each other upward. Today, the Burj Khalifa stands at 828 meters, the Shanghai Tower at 632 meters, the Kingdom Tower in Saudi Arabia, currently under construction, will exceed all of them. Cities spending billions of dollars to answer one question: how high can we go? He said, until the barefoot shepherds compete in the construction of tall buildings. Scholars of Hadith identified this as pointing toward the Arabian Peninsula, where within a single generation, communities that lived as nomadic herders became the owners and builders of the world's tallest towers. Not over centuries, in decades. He said, "The hour will not come until the world is filled with the sound of music, until musical instruments are found everywhere, until wine is consumed openly, until fornication becomes widespread." He said, "A time will come when the truthful will be called liars, and the liars will be believed, when the trustworthy will be called traitors, and the traitors will be trusted." Look at how the media treats the honest scholars of Islam today. Look at how anyone who speaks the truth about the system we described in episode 1 is treated, dismissed, ridiculed, called a conspiracy theorist, labeled dangerous. And look at who is trusted, who is given the platforms, who is celebrated and funded and promoted. The truthful are called liars, and the liars are believed, exactly as he described. He said, "Time will pass quickly. A year will feel like a month like a week like a day like an hour like the burning of a palm leaf." Ask your parents, ask your grandparents, whether time feels faster or slower now than it did in their youth. The universal answer, across cultures and generations, is that time feels like it is accelerating. A year passes in what feels like weeks. Childhood ends before it has begun. Life moves at a pace that leaves people breathless. The prophet, peace be upon him, described this, and it is now a documented psychological phenomenon discussed by neuroscientists and psychologists who have no knowledge of this hadith. He said, "Among the signs that a man will obey his wife and disobey his mother, that he will be close to his friend and distant from his father, that voices will be raised in the mosques, that the leaders will be oppressors, that the trusted will be betrayers." Every single one of these. Every single one. Not most of them. Not some of them. Every characteristic he described as belonging to the era before the hour is present in the world today, documented, visible, undeniable. Now, take the full weight of this. This man, an orphan from the desert, born before telescopes, before printing presses, before any of the tools of modern knowledge, described the 21st century. He described the mental health crisis. He described the skylines. He described the acceleration of time. He described the inversion of truth and falsehood. He described the spread of music and immorality. He described the collapse of family structure and the loss of real scholarship. He described our world in the 7th century in precise, specific, verifiable detail. Now, if a man describes the future this accurately, what does that tell you about everything else he said? About the dajjal, about the day of judgment, about the Quran being the direct word of Allah? Either you accept the implications, or you have to explain how this is possible without divine revelation. And that explanation does not exist. In the next episode, we come to the figure this entire series has been building toward, the one every prophet warned about, the greatest trial in human history. His description, his powers, his deception, and the war being waged right now to prepare the world for his arrival. Episode 3: The Deceiver.